Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. All right, we seem to be waiting for our guests. I'm going to tell you something about CommCon 2019. It's from the 7th to the 11th of July. It's at the Latimer Estate in Buckinghamshire. Did I pronounce that right? Just nod. Oh, you can say hello. Andy Smith is controlling in the United Kingdom. Andy Smith is controlling controlling is a French expression. He is watching my pronunciation of British isms. One of the sports, was it Brian something? I can't remember his name now. Sports, talking about where they have the tennis thing. And the name of that is, where do they have the big tennis?
Wimbledon.
Tournament? Yeah, and he was saying Wimbledon. The Americans say Wimbledon, right?
Well, there you go.
Give us the
it's lost in the translation, I guess.
Give us the correct pronunciation of that.
Well, there may be many correct pronunciations, but I would say Wimbledon.
With a T? With a T?
No. With a D for a delta, because that's the way it's spelled.
Yeah, Wimbledon, not Wimbledon, as he was saying. Anyway, Brian, I can't remember his last name, but he was like almost an intern, starting out sports guy when I lived in Seattle, and I was like 14 or 15 years old. So that tells you something about how long ago that was.
That's before they had composite rackets and things, isn't it?
It's quite possible.
Possibly even before metal rackets.
Quite possibly. At any rate, we are obliged by law to transmit this little information to you.
This call may be recorded for quality control Yeah, quality control. Oh, like that's a thing.
And that was obviously the queen of asterisk and all of voiceovers. Yes, Allison Smith, who will not be apparently at CommCon. Well, I got it. It's CommCon. All right, Jay, are you capable of video at this time?
Well, unfortunately, my videos, I'm having difficulties, so I've got this funky angle going on. So I think I'm going to turn my video off. Yeah, I'll keep going.
It doesn't matter. Nobody's counting. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, Jordan may have a problem. As I said, Jordan was on, and we weren't able to find the date, unfortunately. But it was a couple of years ago, probably. And he is the son of a very good friend of mine who I'm trying to get on, who would be an interesting interview. Jordan is a young man who I met because he's the son of this friend. When I was trying to get on, of trying to do something with a router. And he was working for an ISP, and he said, that's nothing. And he, like the magic wand, and it was done. You know what I mean? In the days when that stuff was all very daunting. Now it's more, you're talking about more firewall stuff being daunting. And even then, our experts, like Andy, have no problems with that. I should also say that we are in the process, I don't know how to explain this. Our server was reimaged, VUC.me. So when you go there now, you have two lines of text. One says that we're redoing the server, which is a bald-faced lie because I'm not doing anything on it, and no one else is either. And did I post it? Yeah, I did. So Corrado's not ready yet, apparently. And the other thing is just a link to live.vuc.me. If you're listening to this on ZipDX or on one of the phone-in numbers, you can go to live.vuc.me. All you'll see is me, and in a moment, Andy, when he comments. In fact, I think I'll just shoot the focus over to Andy.
Was that a prompt, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you'll see me as well.
Okay, Andy. and Jay. And Jay is in Phoenix. He's having a big swig of his coffee, which actually is whiskey, but I'm not supposed to tell you that.
Irish coffee.
Jay, what have you been up to? Because we need to kill time here, and what better way than to hear what Jay's been up to?
Oh, all sorts of mischief. But I am very interested in the topic for today, which is how do you get workable collaboration going among a team that's spread out all over the globe. And I think this is a really key topic that where there's room for a lot of innovation. And the other thing that I'm interested in is just sort of thoughts on how important is it to meet in person, and how often should you meet in person in order to have an effective working team. So, those are some questions that I'm really interested in. And above and beyond that, I'm also interested in how do you the technical term is credit assignment. How do you cut people into the profits, if any, of whatever the endeavor is? And then the other part is, how do you deal with the intellectual property around what a team works with? And how do you deal with the issues when somebody has a day job and they might have strings attached to their day job developer requirements? And how do you have a hackathon, or we call them blockathons in the blockchain world? How do you do that? How do you incorporate people into a collaborative, creative endeavor? So those are all kind of topics that I'm interested in. And, I was hoping to bounce some of those off of Jordan and get his input today. But other than that, I'm up to all kinds of mischief. And yeah, I don't want to bore you with all of that. But
well, before you do, yeah, Jordan, we're waiting for Jordan. He may have, as I said privately earlier, he's heading up a company. They have investors, and maybe he's on a call with one of them or something. Or maybe there's some fire he had to put out. So I would tend to forgive him because I've known him for years and because I know the situation, as compared to a few people who have just dropped out with no notice. But Jay, back to you. I want to ask you what collaboration platforms you've used. Presumably you've used Slack. We all have. I mean, Andy, me, James, all the regulars have. We had our own for a while. And when you're not paying for a platform like Slack, there are disadvantages. I'm not going to complain. It was free. But there are things that we did not approve of, or did we not appreciate that much. But I'm just curious what you've used. Not that Parabol is a Slack competitor that I know of, by the way. We would need Jordan to explain to us what it does. And it's a very interesting concept that came right out of his vision. That's why he's here. But Jay, what have you used in collaboration with regard to what you just said? What kind of things have you used?
Well, so I run hackathons, and I'm involved in startups and so forth. But generally, one of the first things that I set up is G Suite, so then we've got slides and repositories and docs and all that stuff, and common email. But that's probably like number one. Number two, I've used Slack, I've used GitHub, I've used Zoom, I've used Google Hangout, all those elements. And, what I'm looking at now is something called CRDT, which is conflict-free resolution data types, which can be done on a decentralized peer-to-peer construct. And there's something called PeerPet.
You have to get into a little bit of detail on what you just said, because CRDT, because obviously that doesn't tell us much. Tell me a little more about that. Tell us.
So it's a way on a peer-to-peer basis to have a common set of documents or files that are updated, and the conflicts in terms of the time are resolved via the algorithms that are behind it. And so I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer networking, and there's things like PeerPad where you can do something like Google Docs, but it's not associated with a centralized entity like Google. So I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in WebRTC that's on a peer-to-peer basis, that's open source, because I Slack has gained momentum and a lot of people use it, but I still have a reservation about using something that is centralized, that is proprietary for that matter. And so I'm rambling a bit, but the bottom line is I'm looking at more open source, peer-to-peer, no client server constructs, where you've got a set of tools that hopefully have longevity, that you're not going to be subject to somebody turning off the service, or the service being bought by somebody, or the service doing some sort of weird policy thing. So does that answer your question, Randy?
It does. It does. And it raises a bunch of other questions. And you mentioned a few of the problems with this, which is things like turning it off. So you said G Suite, but G Suite, assuming paid G Suite, it won't just be pulled, the rug won't be pulled under us. I mean, I have a 2-seat company G Suite thing that we did when we were working, when we had our company. We don't have the company anymore, but I kept it. So, we are paying, and I do know that the support is fine on it. And I do not expect them to just suddenly decide, well, we're not doing mail anymore, or we're not doing whatever's in the G Suite suite, if I could, probably won't disappear in any quick delay, because we're paying for it. I don't know if you're talking, there is a tier of G Suite that was free. We also have one of those that we use with the VUC. Do they even do that anymore, free? I don't think they offer a free version of it. Although maybe for education or something like that, charity. But
don't know. It's hard to keep up with all the changes in so many of these tool sets. But I mean, G Suite, in my view, is a very compelling proposition.
But it's still Google, centralized, and it's proprietary.
Yeah, I mean,
not open source.
Yeah, it's not open source, and I think overall, I'm grateful for Google, because they provide a phenomenal set of tools and services that would have cost tons and tons of money, 10 years ago, for sure. And however, the problem is that you're subservient to whatever they happen to decide in the future what happens to Google. I mean, you don't have to look any further than GitHub to see what can happen. Same thing with LinkedIn and so forth. And I'm not necessarily knocking Microsoft either. I mean, I definitely see the compelling reasons for buying GitHub and LinkedIn and so forth. But from a end user standpoint, it puts me in a very precarious situation, or vulnerable situation, for building all this content, putting all this content into these centralized constructs, and then if they go away, you're kind of toast. So
not only if they go away, but also what are they doing with there are two things, actually. There's what do they do with the information that they're getting, and in Google, mostly we know that they're building your profile, your social graph, and all of that. But the other problem, if I can remember it in my little two hemispheres here, is let me say this with an example. And Andy, we're going to come to you in a second. I want to know what you think of this. But there's a motor scooter rental thing happening in this city now. Not the Vespa type stuff, not the scooters that you stand on. And so I went to register there, and they ask for a lot of information. They need your ID, they need your driver's license, they need your email, blah, blah, blah. I started thinking, you upload all this stuff. Suppose you put your passport and your driver's license and your email on there. Sooner or later, they're probably going to be hacked. And then your passport, your driver's license, and your email are on there, including and your address and everything. So I decided, you know what? It's probably not even worth it. And to some extent, all of the services you mentioned, like LinkedIn, for example, it's pretty innocuous, right? LinkedIn, you're on there. But I'm not in business anymore. So when I want to look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, I've created a thing called, I don't even remember what it's called. It's an obviously not even a person's name. And I'm not following anybody and I don't have any connections, but at least when I click on a link, I can go look at somebody's profile. So there's the security aspect, I guess, and the inevitable we've been hacked aspect of this stuff, which means that, okay, Google theoretically shouldn't be too bad, the G Suite paid version. But still, I mean, they're centralized and they're not you. So if you're able to run your own thing, you're better off. But of course, there's a trade-off on that too. Andy, your experience, I know you've experienced Slack on the VUC. You may have done it with other things.
I still use Slack. It's the only one I do still use, apart from G Suite. I hardly ever and have really never bought into the whole idea of LinkedIn. But in terms of collaboration tools, I mean, we've had a few on here that we tried. HipChat, which of course is no more. I've just checked that it is no more. HipChat was a collaboration tool. Cisco Spark, which we used for a while. I tried using, but that never really took off either. I'm not aware of any company or a commercial entity who's hung their hat on Cisco Spark. I do know that Microsoft Teams is much bigger than any of us would probably give it credit for, but I think it comes as part of Office 365. So if you pay for Office 365, you automatically get Microsoft Teams.
What's your experience? What is your experience with 365?
There's absolutely zero. I've not used it. I mean, I still have Office that sits on my machine here, and I'd much rather look at servers. I'm not a great one for using cloud services. I still don't believe what people do with your data, basically. So and all these things, it's just then hackable, and somebody pulls it out and uses it for nefarious purposes. I will not buy into that, I'm afraid. It may be cheaper, it may be the way forward, but then I shall be dead soon. That'll do. You know?
It has its advantages, but indeed, it's kind of crazy to put all your eggs in that basket, for sure.
Well, and the use of cloud computing is all very well, but there are some specialist areas. I've had experience with a guy who's been trying to use AWS and VPNs to AWS over the last few days, and there are problems. You can get it to work, but it's not the simplest thing in the world, and it's not something that naturally drops to people. In other words, it's not at all intuitive, the way that these things are strung together. And I find that generally with an awful lot of these collaboration tools, that the engineers who think it up know exactly how it's all going to hang together. But the actually transmitting that information to people who are going to use it is, as usual, not fantastic. And you have to invest quite a lot of time in understanding exactly how it works, what use it's going to be to you. It doesn't leap off the page, so to speak. And I found that with nearly all the collaboration tools that I've tried to use, and even silly little things like I've really never used an IDE for programming. I still use just files. I write a program. I don't care about the auto completion and other such things. I'd rather complete it myself.
It's annoying, actually, auto completion. All right, I reached Jordan. He's going to come in a second. It's really funny because he says he spaced it, and I mean, if you're, I don't know, it's ironic, but it's great.
Well, I'm actually just looking at Parabol.co at the moment at the demo. I'm hoping he's going to run through some of this stuff.
They were on, Andy, when you've been with us for a long time, and Parabol, Jordan's been with us before. I couldn't find it, but I know that he did, and it may have been before Jay was around, but now they've been on for a couple of years, so it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. And I want to hear more about his process of how he even came to think about this, too. This isn't just a sales demo. We're going to talk about how this actually came to be.
Randy, I'm going to step away for just a moment.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back.
I don't remember them being on, but
yeah,
that's probably just a memory failure on my part. So.
Yeah, no, the problem is that we don't have the site anymore, so I can't. Ooh, Pistachio just jumped away from me. My nuts are falling. Oh, here you go. 20-second rule.
Why don't you just use my drive to turn round? Yeah, why not? I have to love bank employees.
Oh, turning around in your drive.
Yeah, I get about 10 of them a day.
You must be in a very, oh, damn. What happened here? Join us. Didn't I give the, okay. You must be in a opportune space for them to turn around. Why bank employees? You have a bank right next door?
I have JP Morgan about 150 meters down the road.
Villains should be in jail.
Yeah.
No,
nothing particularly against bank employees, Maxime, you understand?
Well, he's an exception anyway.
Yeah, anyway, collaboration tools in general, I'm not sure they really deliver what they're promised to be. So it'll be interesting to hear the rationale and progress that has been made on Parabol.
Well, I don't think it can be described as a well, it's a tool, but it's not Slack or anything. It's not a Slack killer. Well, hopefully he'll tell us all that. But as far as I know, it doesn't address that particular market. It's something very specific. And I'm curious to hear how he got the idea. And you're getting too many redirects with that link. All right. What is the solution to this? Try another browser. Oh, try another browser. Yes, we're live.
Okay.
Chrome only. I hope he's not using Chrome and getting the too many redirects.
One thing, of course, that the Hangout that we're using at the moment doesn't give us is some of the information about where we're connected, which was an interesting thing from looking at using Jitsi Meet last week.
And there is a specific reason why I didn't choose. I should have. Oh, he's using Chrome. Damn it. Something to do with logins. So yeah, live from the VUC. It's me talking to Jordan. Something to do with logins and IDs. Maybe multiple. Try what do you call it? Incognito mode. Try. Only I could write a 3-letter word without making mistakes. So he's using Chrome. I should maybe have thought of using You're right. It would have been interesting. But the reason I didn't is very clear, and it is that it's a lot more work using Jitsi only in the part of starting the actual Hangout session. Just because you have to go into the YouTube Live, whatever it's called, and start. It's really annoying, actually.
So it's about integration into YouTube, really.
Yeah, which is fine. It's just that there's several extra steps, and it's laborious, to tell you the truth. But we're going to have to do it sooner or later because Hangouts on Air is disappearing. So that's going to be dead.
So interestingly enough, as we were talking, I get a notice that says, please note that your account was set up to self-destruct after 6 months of inactivity and is scheduled for deletion in a week. So that's from a service which will remain unnamed. But
kind of like what I was saying about what is it? Registration.
Yeah.
I'm afraid one of you is going to reveal that before I can have a chance to tweet it out and have the accolades from all over the world in the internet, on Twitter or.
Oh, we'll be sure to both like it and share it. Don't worry.
Yeah, share it. Share the crap out of it. I'm looking at Twitter right now, watching for Jordan to see if he. Jordan is brilliant, and I don't use the term lightly. But he's a perfect example. There's just some things that are too daunting for people who are really bright. And one of them, Tim had this problem too, by the way, and I don't know what the solution was. It wasn't the same error, but he had a problem with something. There's a problem with Google ID and Chrome. And since Hangouts have to be Chrome now, your Google ID has to be clear. I told him my suggestion was to try incognito mode. I should look at IRC and see if anybody is saying anything. No. What I said was to try incognito mode and log in through that, which would eliminate all the old cookies.
Well, perhaps connecting to ZipDX in the old-fashioned might not be a bad play. Has he got a phone number? Could we
well, he might. Well, the thing is, he probably, if he can do, since he can do video, but yeah, he could, I guess. Because at this point, it'd be a shame not to see him and see if he has any things to share. However, anything would be more compelling than watching me eat pistachios, right?
Well, I don't know. There's a bit of alcohol missing. That would make it more compelling. But
hit me with an invite. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that because we never use these anymore. Oh, wait a minute. That is the invite. Oh, okay. Wait. I see what he means. I don't think you can. Can you invite people who aren't on Gmail? Oh, okay. Done. Done. This Twitter client I'm using is annoying because it doesn't show my responses for some reason. Anyway, all right. Let's see if he can make it in from the invite. I always thought you had to have a Gmail to invite somebody. Anybody know if that's true?
I have no idea. I've never noticed it. I've done it from other accounts, but they may be in some way linked.
You are the only person whose invites ever worked, as far as I know.
Oh, I'm special.
Yeah. Invites never worked well on Google+. And I did a lot of testing with various accounts that I have.
That was an interesting thing about Android 9, by the way.
Yeah.
In that Google Plus is still there as an app.
Yeah, because if you have G Suite, it's still on. I'm still on Google Plus.
All
I
right.
never used it or posted there, but I could.
I'm gonna have a look.
Ah, that did work. Look at this. All right. Now all we need now is audio.
Huzzah.
There we go. Wait, I don't have a cheering sound. Do I have applause? Let's see. No, I got rid of all those silly ones. The only thing we have is this.
This call may be recorded. Actually, is being recorded for whatever purposes we like, because we can.
Jordan, all right. So you fell asleep. You were up late last night.
No, I was up. I was just in focus mode. My partner hit me up. So we do a lot of business now in Germany. And you may be aware that the Germans are very particular about data privacy and security. And so they hit us up with a form this morning, which is like 5 a.m. my time, with like a fill out this thing. So I started filling that out, and then I finished.
And that was the time sink. All right, Jordan, we're going to take advantage of the fact that you're here. I just want to tell people who may have happened onto this that your dad is somebody who I've known for nearly 60 years, and he's going to come and join us. He's an interesting guy, but this is not about him. This is about you. You and I met through him, of course, and you were someplace. I don't remember exactly the situation, but I think maybe this was in the Twin Cities. You and I met, and I was having trouble getting on, not AOL, but there was some router thing that we were trying to resolve, and you were working for an ISP, right? In those days.
I was working, well, gosh, it's hard to say. When I was,
let's get your origin story. You're
all
a
right.
superhero. What was your first tech gig?
Wait, did you ever see the show Doogie Howser?
I know what it is. I've never watched it.
The kid doctor.
Yeah.
I was kind of like the kid engineer. So the short story is my dad is a music guy, as you are, and and he was into radio when he was Randy, probably in his early 20s, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were in it.
Yeah, both of you.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm going to get my kid into radio, but not on the broadcast side of it, on the amateur radio side of things. And so he used to drop me off with like these Korean war vets and a dwindling number of World War II vets. And, it was an amateur radio club, and they taught me about radio. And I did a science fair project that combined computers and amateur radio and set up a network, a really long network down the Mississippi River, and did a science fair project and ended up getting in the newspaper, and then got hired by this local international company, local to Minneapolis, called Digi International. And as part of Digi International, because I was in the testing group before I started doing proper development, I set up an ISP, because Digi made a bunch of modem related technology. And we sort of had our own ISP as our own real world test bed.
But who was the guy when I first met you? Okay, you were working for somebody who said it's easy. Who was that?
Oh,
you don't remember? We're going back further.
No. Well, see, now I'm old enough where I don't remember things anymore.
You're almost a senior. You're junior, senior. Anyway, all right, we're not going to go all over all that stuff, but the point was to get your point of inspiration. And so you've been in various things, and I know you're an innovator. And Owen and I have talked about, by the way, this is embarrassing probably for everybody involved, but Owen has always said he reminded me of you to me.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So whatever. Yeah. Anyway, hey, I didn't do that bad. I'm still alive, still kicking. Did my contribution to society and so on. Anyway, Owen was trying to explain to me. Now you've been on this before. You explained Parabol before, but things have advanced quite a bit since then. We're going to talk about the offer and all that, but first let's get to how this even came about. I mean, what is the what was the need that you saw? Because you're an inventor. You look at something and you go, oh, this got to be fixed. What do we got to do? What was the situation that provoked this idea, first of all, before it got developed even?
Well, it really, like many inventions, so Parabol is meeting software, and but it's very particular. So Google Hangouts, which we're on right now, I see Google Hangouts kind of like the Jetsons telephone. It's facilitating open communications. It's open to portal. What we're creating is something that combines that concept, so combines voice and video with other tools that allows meetings to happen more easily, more productively. And to give you an example of that, so I'll give you the frustration. I left engineering after 20 years of building stuff. I joined this strategic consultancy that was thinking about how to help big companies explore new technologies. And I was hired by this consultancy to begin working with GE on what GE called advanced manufacturing, but I thought of as 3D printing and digital fabrication. And I'd be in these meetings that were very expensive meetings, senior folks. And they were just terrible meetings. We'd sit there for 2 and 3 hours and no decisions would get made. And people would kind of actively avoid accountability. No task, like people would talk about things to do, but they wouldn't actually write them down. And a lot of these folks were not digitally native, so they didn't have the culture to use a to-do list that was transparent with their colleagues. So it was hard for them to hold each other to account. And that really bugged me. So I was like, why are we all here? Aren't we here? Aren't we like alive to do things in the world? And at the same time, I would have these clients who would sit in traffic for a couple of hours and then they'd show up to their office. And I noticed that they would just sit in their office all day and look at their laptop screen and be on a WebEx with 5 or 6 different time zones. And I had this dawning realization that we are increasingly becoming a remote workforce, even if we're sitting in traffic. And so I had the idea to combine a lot of these pains, which is, all right, well, if we're going to be having video meeting after video meeting, and if these video meetings are going to be rambling and aren't going to create forward momentum, like I'm going to be unhappy with life. So I'm going to try and create something that's going to make it easier for people to work together.
And what was the first iteration of that? Because you must have sat down and tried to code. I don't even know, it'd be interesting actually for the folks listening to know what you coded it with. Your very first, was it proof of concept or prototype, either one, or not even? Maybe.
Oh, it was so bad.
What tools were used? That'd be interesting to everybody.
It was so bad. Well, we knew it was going to be a web application to begin with, and we wanted that web application to be at least marginally usable on mobile. But I was really hard-headed as a designer, and I wanted it to feel like Google Docs out the gate. So I wanted it so that you could, like, as people were typing, you could see other people typing, and then that's a huge technical headache, but we climbed over that hill. And the first thing that we made, and we were a team of 3 when we started in 2015, was just like a demo that people could join a link and like create a bunch of cards, and then they could all be typing in the cards at the same time. And we knew that we needed one other person technically right away. And that, like, the software didn't really do anything yet. We just wanted to kind of like form a team of people that were interested in solving this problem. And I found this one guy named Matt who was in the Peace Corps, and he had published a bunch of open source libraries and frameworks around collaborative editing and collaborative applications. And I was like, wow, this is the person that I wish I could work with, but he looks busy and so on. And he like ignored every attempt at me reaching out to him until finally I wrote him an open love letter on Medium, being like, you're the coolest thing. And he was like, "What's your deal?" And then we started talking. And anyway, long story short, then we joined forces, and he was person number 4. And our first product was like a status meeting killer for executives, because that was the community I was closest to. And it kind of worked in the sense that like we got some contracts, and like I would be included in the box. And so like all the executives would go in the meeting, and then I would like lead the meeting using our own software. But and like we got good names. Like we were working with Dow Jones, we were working with Airbus, we were working with like a bunch of great companies. But when we went out to go and raise money, we looked like a consulting company, because like, Jordan, you're in the box. They don't want your product, they want you, you know? And so then we pivoted, and then that's when things got a lot easier.
Okay, and I'm going to find, here we go, find the app so that I can show, find the application window so that I can show. So we're on parabol.co for people, because they can run to that, check it out while we're speaking of it. And there's a demo. So Owen was telling me that there's, because I didn't remember from your last visit, and we never figured out what date that was, whether there was initially a free tier or what the deal is. So what's the model now is that there is, at least temporarily, a free tier or a free demo. What's the story on that? So that if people want to go and immediately sign in, what do they do?
So there's a free tier, and we're free and open source, and that's really important to us. So you know, you don't ever have to pay us if you want. You can just click on the Octocat icon in the header and check us out and run us with your team if you want. Who we're really targeting now is we're targeting agile development teams mostly. So if you're a distributed development team and you run a thing called a retrospective, where you and your teammates get together and you're trying to figure out how, like, what happened over the last development cycle, the last development sprint, how can we do better? Our software makes that really easy to do remotely. And it's free for up to 2 teams. So what happens is you create basically a team space, and you invite a bunch of your colleagues. And if you have a second team, you can create a second team space. You can use this for free. If you create a third team space, it'll still look free. But if you look really attached, either myself or one of my colleagues will reach out to you and ask you very gently to pay. And if you're like, hey, I don't have the credit card, we'll help you make the case to your boss.
So this is a little bit like the S word, Slack. I'm showing the only reason I'm showing myself, not beautiful, but let me move this up a little bit. I'm showing the URL, which is right here, parabol.co. And that's for people who are listening, although if they're looking at my face, they'll be distracted, I know, because it's beautiful. But parabol.co. Okay, so people are going to immediately, Slack being the darling of these things these days, it isn't Slack. It isn't like Slack at all, is it?
No. And as a matter of fact, so Slack are actually investors in us. So one of the things that's changed is I think when we last spoke, like we were really, really, really fresh and young. Yep. And now we've raised just shy of $1 million. We have, as of this morning, so we count our metrics every Friday, and today's Friday, 8,100 registered users, which is pretty good. We're getting close to 3,000 who are active on the platform routinely, which is great. With Slack, it's kind of like I almost think of it like a text messaging thread, like in a mobile context, except made ubiquitous across many devices. And so it's real-time text communication for the most part. And sure, you can fire up a video chat if you want, but what our thing does is it's a meeting space. And so if there's some kind of activity that you were going to conduct with Post-it notes in a conference room, but all of a sudden you're remote, well, we're kind of that online Post-it notes plus conference room plus robot facilitator that will make that meeting really easy to run no matter where you are.
And I think, by the way, Jay may have some questions. Jay, this is something you should be jumping on just to check it out, I think. Let's see if he has any questions for you.
Yeah, I'm Jordan. Thanks. I think this is a really key need that's out there for sure, because I think we're seeing more and more collaborative teams that are dispersed around the world, and it's really tricky in terms of how do you bring those teams together? How do you do exactly what you said, which is how do you document what's said during a meeting? How do you hold people accountable? All those things are really, really critical. So I'm interested in this, and I really wasn't familiar with it until Randy posed the topic yesterday, and I started looking into your platform. So I guess my questions for you, Jordan, are twofold. Number one is where do you see that you guys have provided the most value to the folks that are using your platform? And number two is where do you see the biggest area for improvement? That if you had a magic wand, what would you create to make it even more useful?
Yeah, thank you for both of those questions. We create the most value for teams that are going through a remote transition. So they have a really strong culture where they have certain meetings and ceremonies that they've held in a conference room for a long time, and because of trends, people want to work from home, or they've just hired their first remote employees, or whatever the case is, all of a sudden their culture breaks and they need to find a way to include those people. That's where we create the most value. We let our customers dictate to a large extent where we want to go next. And they helped pull us in the direction of adding video. Video is in beta right now with us. If anyone, because I know that there's a lot of people that are interested in internet communications in this group. If anyone wants to help us test that, you can write me at jordan@parabol.co. We are getting requests for other kinds of activities. So people really like that it can be an open space where it's just post-it notes that you can move around, but people really like that the activities are guided by some process, because it means that you're always going to get to some conclusion at the end of the time that you are together. People are asking us for things like, hey, can you help us prioritize? Can you help us have better conflict resolution, and so on and so forth? And so we see a future where we add many more paints to our paint box, and people can use us in different contexts.
And when you say conflict resolution, are you talking about like in terms of the data? Are you talking about like CRDTs, which I was talking about a little bit earlier?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about CRDTs. Awesome. I am talking about human conflict, although we are using CRDTs in order to facilitate that interaction with the software. So what happens is, people come up with disputes all the time. Anyone who's doing anything of value are going to disagree eventually. And sometimes, because we're human beings, the emotions take over. So people are asking us for a process where people can reflect ahead of getting together with somebody else in order to, they've really come at loggerheads and sort of write down the facts. Like, these are the objective things of what happened. Maybe someone, from the outside comes in to try and help after you've written things down, kind of organize what is undeniably true versus what's the story. And anyway, then like lead you through some sort of process where you can have a common ground dialogue with someone. So when you get done with this high stakes meeting, you feel better when you close your laptop lid and you're like, just back at home versus in your virtual office.
Well, that's really, really awesome, because as human beings, things happen and then we make stories up about them. Like, this means this and that and blah, blah, blah. So I'm really, really interested to see your process. for the human conflict resolution. That's really cool.
Well, let's test this thing, Jay. You get started, and I'll jump in with there, and then we'll send our recommendations or ideas to Jordan, and
Oh, please.
he will award us the yearly awards that we get. Jordan, would this be, if we look at the model of a city council, a small town, a small city, so you've got what, 8 people, say, and so they have their meeting. I don't even know how these things actually work in real life, but most of these people are clueless technically, right? Suppose the new young lady comes in who's running this thing. She's 22, so hey, she's been online since she was born, and she's going to run this city council of Saragota, whatever, some state. So she says, okay, everybody, you're going to join this thing, and this is how this is going to work. So they have their first meeting. It's about the street, improving the street lighting on some street. Can you run through just quickly what that would look like? So they're sitting there, they're in their meeting. What, does everybody have phones, devices open, or go ahead, let you do
Yeah,
that.
I'll show you. Actually, it's pretty easy. So I'm going to share a screen, and also make sure that I turn on D&D. Okay, so if you go to parabol.co, you can hit this orange button to do the play at home game if you wish, and it brings you into one specific kind of meeting. So this is just a link that people can navigate to, so that link could be dropped into a calendar appointment. This particular meeting type is called a retrospective, which allows you to look back on a previous period of work or some project that you've completed. All of these little chits that are getting entered here are being done by my robot colleagues. And, we could say things like, let's start each morning by saying hello to each other on Slack. Might be a suggestion that we have for working better together. Might be something like continue using parabol.co to hold meetings. I like this, or whatever. What happens is that's the first activity. Then the second activity is grouping among all of the feedback that had been given. And so for the first time, I can now see the feedback from my colleagues. It's kept anonymous, so people can be honest with each other. And maybe, I'll group things that have to do with our meeting process. And our AI will name these buckets of cards. And then as a team, we can actually vote on what it is that we want to talk about. And so I can see my colleagues spending the votes. So I'll spend some on the way that we meet and maybe some teamwork. And then what'll happen is the votes will be tallied, and our software will host a discussion that's centered around these reflections, and we can create some concrete takeaway tasks. And these tasks, as they're created, so let's see, decisions, maybe try Lumio as an app to help us make decisions. I can publish this to my task manager of choice, which is pretty cool too. And once we've gone through this meeting process, then everyone gets a really awesome summary. And normally you'd be taken to your team timeline, and you can see all this on your team timeline, but this is the demo. And that's like half of what our experience looks like.
We're going to have to try this between ourselves, and we actually worked extensively. Are you familiar with Jitsi Meet, Jordan?
Oh yes, I have seen Jitsi before, and I see. I have to resize my window to. There we go.
Right now you're showing me, which is just disconcerting. All right, there we go.
Jordan, I'm sorry I have to leave, but I think your project's really cool and interesting, and I'll give it a try. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And actually, Randy, I have to go as well. I have to meet with some folks. We're introducing Parabol today to the Smithsonian Museum, which is pretty exciting.
That's great news, and we totally understand that, Jordan, and not a problem. Fantastic. Thanks for coming by again, and we'll check it out, and I'll be in touch with you, and we'll see if we can. Hey, we might be able to fix this. I don't know.
Let's try and get Papa Owen on here as well. That would be so much fun.
Waiting for next week if you're available. I'll keep you posted. Okay.
That's awesome. Great,
All right.
Randy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. Take care.
Bye.
All right, Jay's gone. Andy, you and I can go to mature mode, which means cutting the broadcast off because it is 1 hour long, and we ran our jaws adequately for the first half. What do you think?
I think it should be I am mature.
Well, I don't know. Are you?
Instant messaging mature.
Oh, instant messaging mature. Okay. Anyway, we're going to go. Too bad Jay had to go. He had some good questions. Again, Parabol, Parabol.co. His father's somebody who I'm trying to get on, who I've known for years and years, and has done amazing things with his life, unlike me. So we'll see you next week. If there is a VUC next week, that is a question in everybody's mind. Oh, wait a minute. There's a thing I'm supposed to run here. Let me grab the, so far I've got a no fault, but let's see if I can screw that up. Okay, here we go.